Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your week is off to a good start. It is Cowboys week, and actually it's Tuesday because of the holiday yesterday on Labor Day, so good Tuesday afternoon to you. Let's welcome in Lance Reisland, plain dealer, cleveland.com, film breakdown video analysis of keys to beating the Cowboys this Sunday. We got 4 of them, Lance, and you start out with make the Cowboys pass only. So take us through kind of the thinking through that.
Well, you're going to get, obviously you got to stop the run. You got to run the ball. And I think both the Browns and Cowboys are going to try to establish the run a little bit. But I will tell you this, losing Pollard has made them one-dimensional. And what you're going to get here is this is what I think you're going to get on first down. You're going to get 8 in the box here, and they're going to stop the run, and they're going to try to make the Cowboys pass only. The reason they're going to make them pass only is because that plays to the strength of the Browns. They can get it to second 8+. Now their pass rush, that deep defensive line, and those good secondary guys can cover, create turnovers. So there's a real, I think they can make them pass only, and that comes down to the offense as well, getting ahead. The Browns will have the advantage here, but I think that's the first thing that's got to happen. Obviously, both sides of the ball, they got to stop the run themselves, and then they got to run the ball a little bit to protect their tackles and Deshaun Watson a little bit. But for me, they got to stop the run, get it to second long, and they're way ahead and have a big advantage.
Yeah, to your point, starting running back is Ezekiel Elliott. They signed Dalvin Cook. They've got Rico Dowdell, and again, that if you were 2018 and you had Cook and Ezekiel Elliott, I'd be concerned, much more concerned than 2024. All right, number 2, plan for Lamb and Ferguson. So you're talking about the primary pass catchers, tight end Jake Ferguson and CeeDee Lamb.
Well, you're talking about they got 283 of their total. So right here this is what you got to do to Lamb. You got to tackle him in space. He's very, very good. If you don't, this is what happens. He's an elite route runner, and he's great with the ball. He's great run after catch. And then, obviously, the last clip you're going to get here is going to be Delpit. Delpit is a guy who's gotten much better. This is him during joint practices. I got a couple of really good cuts of him, guarding those tight ends. So what ends up here happening with CeeDee Lamb is that CeeDee Lamb is a guy, he's a good route runner, but he's a great guy with just getting separation with athleticism. So he can run the full route tree, but what he really does well is he's just an athlete. So he runs those slants very well, very Jamar Chase-like, slants, fades, corner routes. He just kind of gets open, and he's really, really talented when he gets the ball in his hands. So I think they got to tackle when he gets it. They got to disrupt him at the line of scrimmage, same with Ferguson. Delpit's got to get in his face, whether it's Delpit, whether it's a JOK, whether it's Thornhill, whoever, McLeod, whoever they're going to get, they got to be physical with these two. Like I said, 283 targets last year, so 47% of Dak Prescott's targets last year went to these two. So you think about that. Every time he throws the ball, half the time it's going to these two. So they got to have a plan for these two, whatever it is. Not go away from what you do defensively, but you got to be aware of these guys on every snap.
Well, Lamb is one of those guys that's a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical, and that's a guy, I don't know about you, to me that screams, all right, we can put Denzel Ward on him, but if you want to get physical with him, you put Martin Emerson on him and say, go shut him down, young man.
Yeah, they have the answers for it. This is the Cincinnati offense that the Browns are made for, right? So anytime you're going to throw the ball and you have multiple receivers, tight ends, the Browns are made for that. They have 3 really good corners. They have 2 really good safeties. They have a great defensive line that can pass rush, which even makes that secondary even better because there's less time to throw the football. But you're right. If if they're going to throw the ball vertical, CeeDee Lamb, if he's going to run a lot of vertical routes, they got Ward. If they're going to get physical, because CeeDee likes to get physical, they have Emerson. If they move him in the slot and they keep the guys outside, they got Newsom, who's also covered. So they have answers for a lot of different things the Cowboys want to do. Anytime you throw the ball, your primary thing is to throw the ball, I think it's an advantage to the Cleveland Browns because of how they're built defensively.
All right, so our next point, 3 of the 4 keys that we have today. A plan for Parsons, and if this guy doesn't scare you, he should. You're talking about Micah Parsons, right up there with Myles Garrett as one of the best rushers in the league.
Yeah, so this guy's a game wrecker. You have to have a plan. So you're going to see here, this is what they got to do. They got to chip on him with either Njoku or Ford. Then they got to get the ball out quick. Could be a check down. This is what Njoku does very, very well. The thing that they cannot do is they cannot leave their guys open. They cannot leave them by themselves or they're going to be in big trouble. So again, they have to make sure they help. They have to make sure they change the launch point. Don't put him in a set position. They got to make sure they run at him so he doesn't get to pin those ears back and come. He's got to be able to play a full defensive end without just rushing the passer. And that comes with chipping, changing the launch point, running at him, getting rid of the ball quick, all the things that Browns do very well. Things that Joe Flacco did very well at the end of the year. It's something Deshaun can learn from, and I think he has. He'll get rid of the football, but you can see here, first one is going to be a chip. The second one is going to be Wyatt Teller coming over. So everybody's got to help. Everybody's got to be aware of where he's at and make sure that as a team, they block. You can see a great block here by the right guard, Wyatt Teller, who's going to come help Hudson. And it's just a kill shot. And this is what they got to do. They got to help, and they got to consistently help and never leave those tackles on an island.
And again, Jedrick Wills did not practice yesterday. It's a day off today. It could end up being Jack Conklin at left tackle, DeJuan Jones at right tackle, both coming off knee injuries. So those are concerns.
Well, Jack Conklin for me is a guy that I've always liked. I liked his whole career. I liked him when he was in college. He'll be fine at either tackle, and number one reason why. Well, first of all, he's a much better athlete than I've ever given him credit for, so you can get to see him practice. But Jack Conklin is a tough guy. And when you're tough and you're a good athlete, you can fight through things. He'll get help with the backs. He'll get help with the launch point. He'll get help with all the things I talked about. But Jack Conklin is a competitor. Jack Conklin wants to block you. He wants to knock you down. So he'll be really good in the run game. They'll help him in the pass game. I don't think they lose a thing with Jack Conklin at left tackle. And eventually I see Jack going back to right and DeJuan Jones going over to the left. The Jedrick Wills doesn't make it back. So they got a lot of options there. Jack Conklin is a really good football player, and I think Browns are very happy to have him at either tackle.
All right, so the fourth and final key is attacking the rookies for the Cowboys, and there's a couple of them at pretty significant spots. You've got Tyler Guyton, 6'8", 322 pounds, on the offensive line, probably going against Garrett or Zadarius Smith. So take us through this one.
So the Browns have great depth. So you're going to see here, you're going to see him up at the right tackle. So first of all, he played a lot of right tackle. He only got 26 starts at Oklahoma. And if you see him up at the top here, he's real high in his pass set. And he can do that at the college level because he's a great athlete. But if he does that at the pro level, Myles Garrett is going to bend underneath him, which you're going to see right here. Myles Garrett has that incredible bend around the corner, and he consistently bends. The reason I like this clip is that's Micah Beckton, who's similar. He's 6'7", Tyler Guyton 6'8". It's just really hard to block Myles Garrett with that low center of gravity. And again, I think it hurts that he's only had 26 starts at college. I think it hurts him that he played right tackle. And I think it hurts him that he's 6'7", because this is something he's never seen. So usually he's going against guys who are quick or strong. Myles is going to be stronger and faster than him. As much as the Cowboys have to help, the Browns have to help on Micah Parsons. The Cowboys have to help on Myles Garrett, or he will absolutely ruin the football game for the Cowboys.
And the other thing is now the Browns have even more depth when you add in Quentin Jefferson, who can get pressure from the tackle spot. So that's an area they're going to have to take advantage of. The other thing is they're really good cornerback. Deron Bland is out first 6 to 8 weeks with a foot injury. So that means Kalen Carson will be starting. So take us through what you see with Carson.
So Carson here, you can see him against Keon Coleman here back when they're back. Coleman's at Florida State. He's at Wake Forest. And you're going to see one thing, Kalen Carson, he struggles with two things, which I think moved him to the fourth round. One is he has very poor spatial awareness, and he loses track of where he is. So you think about Jerry Jeudy on a vertical. Right here is exactly what Jerry Jeudy, this is a struggle. So Jerry Jeudy catches the ball at the high point when he's back with Denver. So again, two things he really struggles with. One is finding the ball on deep balls. The second thing he does is he gets high and he has trouble changing directions. So if you think about if they move him into the slot against Elijah Moore. So Elijah Moore runs a little return route here. And again, if he is high in his back pedal, it's really hard to change direction. So the two things where I think the Browns can attack. One is vertical with Jerry Jeudy. If he covers Jerry Jeudy at, throwing a vertical at the catch point, the 50-50 balls, because he struggles with spatial awareness. And then if they move him in on the slot, I think he struggles with change of direction, and I think Moore can beat him with those short little option routes and change of direction routes. So I think obviously Diggs and Cooper will cross each other out, but I think the Browns have a big advantage over this rookie because of the two things he struggles with, the Browns have an answer for. And also Jordan Lewis at the nickelback will struggle if he has to cover Njoku. So they have some advantages if they can get to second short.
Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Lance.
As always, thanks for having me.
It's Lance Reisland with a breakdown of some of the keys for the Browns to get that win week 1 against the Cowboys Sunday, 425. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, dough, Skrilla, chips, bread and mo. 2, 5, 10, and 20. 30 big ones, games aplenty. Cheddar, butter, loot and scratch. Find the letters, make a match, cause there's many words for cash, no doubt, and many ways to play a cash word. Check 'em out. Cash word from Ohio, lottery. It's game time, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Former NFL defensive back Devin McCourty on which AFC North, who in the AFC North actually is under the most pressure in 2024. This is from NBC Sports Pro Football Talk.
I'm going high level on this one. I think it's the Haslams in Cleveland. I think they're under the pressure of, you now have this team who for years you've had a strategy, you've lost a lot of games, then you start to get the Myles Garretts of the world, and you start to get the Denzel Wards. Like, you have all of these talented players, and you have a team that they should win. You decided to go all in and pay Deshaun Watson. You've done all these things that, have lined you up to be the team that you want to be. You're in a tough division. I get it. Cincinnati's good. Baltimore's good. But I think, this is the year you want to see the Cleveland Browns go and win and give that fan base what they've longed for years. And I think they're finally at that time. But all the decisions that have been made, the firings and the hirings of general managers, head coaches through the years, it just feels like Cleveland like this. And even I would say last year, it felt like, all right, Cleveland's here. And then they go to Houston and they get killed by Houston in the playoff game, where you're like, all right, well, Deshaun Watson wasn't there. Flacco was a great story last year. But now, if Watson's out there, this is the team that you wanted to see. So I think they're under the pressure, and I think it falls on ownership.
With that, let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, I guess the definition of pressure kind of is you get at that. The Haslams have done everything they could do to put this team in the position they're in, which is, if the quarterback plays well, they're going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing we talked about, since the end of last season is, can Deshaun Watson stay on the field for multiple games? Can he use that that time to find himself some consistency and be able to play at the level or close to the level that he was in Houston. I saw what Shannon Sharp was talking about on First Take, saying that Browns don't even need Deshaun Watson to be 100% of what he was at Houston. It's about 85 to 90%, and they can make a deep playoff run. But when you look at what the Haslam's have done, they clearly have left no stone unturned. This is one of the most expensive rosters in the NFL. They're willing to spend whatever it takes to manipulate the salary cap. So, like Devin McCourty was saying, they've done essentially all they can do to make sure this roster is successful. It's on the coaches and the players essentially to go perform, and we'll see how it all looks starting on Sunday.
All right, so this is from the 33rd team. The percentage of opponents' plays for 0 or negative yardage from last season. And the Browns are number 1 in the NFL by pretty large margin. 41.3% of the plays went for 0 or negative yardage. Ravens were second at 37, and the Cowboys third at just under 36%. Means you better score, and you better score, and you better protect the football, because there's going to be a lot of negative plays that you have with those defenses.
100%. That's going to be so important for both these teams, is to be able to avoid those negative plays where for the Browns, you talk about that explosive pressure that they have with Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith and how aggressive Jim Schwartz can be on third down, the slew of players they can throw at opposing offenses, especially when you look at the Cowboys where they have questions on the offensive line coming into this game. And with Dallas, they have one of the game's best edge rushers in Micah Parsons. And don't sleep on DeMarcus Lawrence. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler. So they have a very talented front as well. The questions for them, I think, are how they can adjust to playing in Mike Zimmer's defense as opposed to what they've had the last couple of years with Dan Quinn. Because Dan Quinn, if you remember when he came to Dallas, that was a bad defense that he was in charge of it before he took over in Dallas. And, he leaves for Washington as the Commanders head coach, and that defense is in a great place. It's so hard to sustain defense year to year to year in the NFL when coaches have 8 months to figure out every flaw in a defense. So I don't imagine both these defenses are going to be as successful as they were a year ago for varying reasons, but still no reason, especially considering neither quarterback has played in the preseason. And there's questions on the offensive line of both teams. No reason the defenses can't have strong afternoons in this game.
All right, so this is kind of interesting as well. Browns record when games are decided by 3 points or less. 2022, they were 1-4, 1 game winning kick. 2023, 5-0, 4 game winning kicks. And again, that points to Dustin Hopkins. And the other thing you would point to, they were banged up all year. So the people that keep pointing to, well, if you're 5-0 in 3-point or less games, there's a regression to the mean. Well, there's also a regression to the mean because of injuries.
Yeah, last year was borderline historic in terms of guys they lost. We can run through the laundry list of guys again that they had to start 5 different quarterbacks. They were on their 4th and 5th offensive tackles by the end of the season. They were out their number 1 running back after the second game of the season, and I could go on and on and on, but that's old history right there. So in that sense, you have to imagine this team's going to be healthier this season simply because they can't be less healthy than they were a year ago. Like I've said before, it felt like every week last season we were talking about another guy or two that was out of practice or going to miss 4 to 6 weeks with an injury. And I think you have to give credit to Kevin Stefanski and the coaches for getting the most out of absolutely everything out of what he possibly had. And there's a reason he won Coach of the Year last season. So certainly to win these close games, it comes down to fine margins. And that's where Dustin Hopkins, like you said, comes into play. Like you said, 4 game winning kicks. I always think about the one he had against the 49ers when PJ Walker was trying to keep up with Brock Purdy, led 2 field goal drives in the 4th quarter of that ball game. Imagine where they are if they don't win that game. That seemed like that provided a lot of momentum in a game I think we could all agree at the time that they really had no business winning. And it just comes down to, can players make the high leverage plays when it matters most? That's what's going to come down to, I think, what comes down to every year, more so in a season where playoffs are the bare minimum expectation by a lot of people.
So 3 bold predictions for the Browns 2024 season. This from Dog Pound Daily. Number 1, Amari Cooper, 10 touchdown passes, or a 10 touchdown season Number 2, Grant Delpit finishes as a top 10 safety. And number 3, Deshaun Watson goes for under 4,000 yards passing. I'm not sure how bold of a prediction that is because I think they're going to run the ball a fair amount. Of those, 10 touchdowns for Cooper, that would be a lot.
Yeah, especially because you look at the investment the Browns made at receiver with Jerry Jeudy coming over from the Broncos in the offseason. So you have him, you have, in addition to Amari Cooper and David Njoku, and even Cedric Tillman has been a lot of buzz, the kind of offseason it had, and maybe he's turned a corner and really can start to produce in 2024. So yeah, that seems the least likely of the three, but to me, the most likely of the three, excuse me, is Grant Delpit becoming a top 10 safety. We saw last season just how productive he was. Just he made so many big plays down in the box and the passing game. We knew about his ability playing downhill. I've said before what kind of perfect fit that was in Jim Schwartz's scheme, that ability to play downhill, blitz, go up and run support. But he showed as well that he's got an ability to play deep in the passing game. I mean, the last season, 2022, 10 pass breakups. Didn't have as many in 2023, but certainly I thought last year he was on his way to being a Pro Bowler, could certainly have made it if he was healthy. And I think as long as he stays healthy, he has a chance to really establish himself as one of the game's best young safeties.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com and I can step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, dough, Skrilla, chips, bread, and mo. 2, 5, 10, and 20. 30 big ones, games aplenty. Cheddar, butter, loot, and scratch. Find the letters, make a match, cause there's many words for cash, no doubt, and many ways to play a cash word. Check 'em out. Cash word from Ohio, lottery. It's game time, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions and prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. The past few days, I've seen many fans bashing Andrew Berry because he cut Ika. Obviously, you don't want to cut a third-round pick so quickly. And in my opinion, a third-round pick should be able to be a starter on your team at the very least. But I've seen fans saying Berry has struggled mightily in the draft, which is a completely false narrative. I mean, seriously, show me one GM that doesn't miss on high draft prospects. For the misses he has had, he also has found some really shiny gems. And finally, to the great Jim Donovan, Godspeed, brother. I wish you a full recovery, and the Browns will win the Super Bowl this season in your honor. Let's go. Thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, I don't know that Andrew Berry has struggled or number one, he hasn't had first-round picks. Jedrick Wills wasn't a great pick at 10. He has, I will say this, hasn't really been super successful drafting wide receivers or defensive tackles. Has been really good at drafting cornerbacks and interior offensive linemen.
Yeah, and don't discount DeJuan Jones either. I think that's what kind of lessens the impact of missing with Siaki Ika, is they came right back, I think it was 13 picks later, and drafted DeJuan Jones, and that already looks like a steal. I mean, right now he's poised to be your starting right tackle in week 1 and potentially for the foreseeable future, especially if he could continue the momentum he showed a year ago. But I think fans should understand, or I want them to kind of understand a little bit that, there's no such thing as batting 1,000 as a general manager. If you're batting about an average of, say a great major leaguer in terms of, producing productive starters out of the draft, I think you're doing a good job. If you're talking like, 40% of your guys are in your 40% of the guys you draft are in your 2 deep or whatever, that's a good job for the Browns. And I think if you're going to judge a GM off what they do with the 98th pick in the draft, and I think that was one of the 4 or 5 final picks of the third round anyway. Those are the compensatory picks. So we're talking guys that have been passed over by pretty much every team at least 3 times. If you're going to judge a general manager off those picks, there's not going to, no general manager is going to last that long if that's the standard you're holding them to, because when you get that far in the draft, there's a reason you're taking guys have certain flaws, and there's a reason guys get passed on that many times. So naturally, you're going to miss far more than you hit. You just have to make the hits count. And when you're at the top, maybe you want to minimize missing, but at the bottom in the later rounds, if you can get that high ceiling player to pop for you, that's when you can really shine, I think, as a GM when it comes to the draft.
Yeah, here's the thing that I would say. Look at the roster. Doesn't matter if you draft him, if you find a way to trade for him, however you put them together. His job is to put together a good roster. Right now, he's put together a really good roster. You can nitpick and say this and that, and you can say this trade and that trade. Look at the Browns roster. Objectively looking at it, people will say it's a top 2 or 3 roster if you discount the quarterback. And again, the quarterback's been hurt. So if you want to sit there and say he's not doing a great job with the roster, you're just not paying attention. All right. Take a look. This is kind of interesting. Last year, Denzel Ward, when he was on the field, the Browns defense gave up an average of 43.9 less rushing yards and 48.3 less passing yards per game. Remember, he missed 3 games. So the passing ones make sense. The rushing one, that they gave up almost 44 yards less rushing when Ward was in there, I was like, wow, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, and I see that number. I wonder how much of it is because, you had Denzel Ward out there. You could put him with Martin Emerson Jr. and Greg Newsome, and then all of a sudden you don't have to play as, protective and safe on defense. You could be a little more aggressive with the rest of your pieces on defense because you have 3 talented corners who can play effectively in man coverage. And when you can load up the boxes more, that's when you can have more success against the run. So I think that's kind of the impact that I think having a corner like Denzel Ward could provide, because he can be left on an island, because he can do well in one-on-one situations, that I would imagine Jim Schwartz has a lot more trust in him than, most other corners. And I mean, how can you blame Jim Schwartz for thinking that? Denzel Ward's a 3-time Pro Bowler in his career. Obviously, Denzel Ward did not play all 17 games last season, but there's no question when he's out there, his presence is felt, especially when it comes to pass coverage. And when you can have corners, like I said, who are really good at being left in islands and ice one-on-one situations, that just opens up your defensive playbook for a lot of creativity to get after the quarterback.
All right. So Quincy Avery is Deshaun Watson's personal quarterback coach. Avery talked about Deshaun Watson's offseason. This is from the Maggie and Perloff show.
I think that this has been his best offseason in a really long time in terms of preparation for the game, being able to throw, putting himself in position where he was able to do all the things throwing-wise that he needs to do to be successful in an NFL game, and he's in a good spot. I mean, we've tested, so it's not, hey, is it as good, right? He throws the ball as hard with more velocity. Like, his miles per hour are higher now than they were prior to the injury, so those things are not like a concern.
Again, we've said this a couple of times, Tim. I think the thing is, he just needs to get on the field and get back into a rhythm. And that's the biggest thing that you can't replicate. He played whatever it was, 5 games at the end of the season 2 years ago. He never played 3 games in a row last year because of injuries. So it's really hard to expect a guy that's in a game, out 2 games, in 2 games, out a game, to play with the other 11 guys or the other 10 guys on the field.
And I think we also have to point out that Deshaun Watson throughout his career has been prone to slow starts during the season. I mean, I don't think that's terribly uncommon, especially if you don't play a lot in the preseason. It's understandable, if week 1 he doesn't look great, and I think fans might want to prepare for that possibility if, we've seen some of the same issues where passes aren't quite where they need to be, where he's a little late in seeing things. I mean, the closest thing he's had to live action since he suffered his shoulder injury in November was the joint practices against the Vikings. And yeah, he didn't have his full offensive line complement with him, but he was also in no danger of being hit. And now you go in this Cowboys game, you got Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence on this defense. Now there's the pressure. Now there's the real threat of being hit out there. How does he respond to that and those sorts of things? And it seems like through training camp, the strength of the arm, the health of the arm really hasn't been in question. It seems like the Browns, as they should have done, have been very deliberate about their approach with Watson. And I wonder if that kind of carries over into the games where they're going to try to be a little more conservative, maybe run the football a little bit just to kind of get Deshaun Watson comfortable at being out there, in full speed gameplay again. And like I said, Watson's had some slow starts in his career. So especially considering he hasn't played since November, I would think fans should be willing to be a little more patient and kind of let him work his way back into it. And obviously he's going to need to protect himself to stay healthy, but I would imagine if it's anything like last season where, third game in the season against Tennessee, he looked more like himself. Certainly by the end of September, you want Deshaun Watson to look more like Deshaun Watson.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Plus, who on the Cowboys concerns the Browns the most? Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, this is TJ from Tampa. Love the show, Dave. Super excited to get going with our season finally. I know all of us are hoping that Deshaun Watson stays healthy and plays well. That's a given. What worries me and what I haven't heard much discussion about is let's assume that Watson does stay relatively healthy. How long do we give him to start playing like a top 10, 12 quarterback in this league? I think it's inevitable. If he doesn't play well the first 3, 4, 5 games, we're going to hear that he's a slow starter. We're going to hear he's rusty. He didn't play in the preseason. The O-line is not 100%. We're going to hear all of that. This team's too talented to just keep waiting. At what point would we maybe see Jameis Winston if things go wrong? Just curious on your thoughts. As always, go Brownies.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, I don't know about you. I don't think if Deshaun Watson is healthy, I don't think Jameis Winston will play. I think they got to figure it out, and they'll give it the entire year. And if he just doesn't look – and I fully believe if he stays healthy, he's going to have a nice year.
Yeah, you and me both. We've talked about it, throughout the offseason. I think Deshaun Watson, the more he's played in Cleveland, the better he's looked. And I think that's, the ultimate thing, coming into the season is can he be out there for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 games in a row? Because I think that's when, like you said, he can establish that rhythm, establish that consistency, and, look comfortable out there. And I think obviously the more he's played, the more comfortable he's looked. And I look at the schedule. The Cowboys, obviously, we've talked about their defense a lot. Going to Jacksonville week 2 is not going to be a cakewalk either because Jacksonville's got a pretty good defense as well. So that's going to be an interesting test. When I look at the schedule and where I would think, okay, this is kind of the point where I want to see something out of Deshaun Watson where he's looking good, I would look at the week 5 trip to Washington for me because I think obviously, when you got after those two, you got games against the Giants and Raiders. Those are both extremely winnable games, especially the home game against the Giants. The Raiders, I think it's going to be tricky because the Browns have had some tricky games against the Raiders in the past. Washington, I think for me in week 5 will be very interesting. Obviously, I would expect the Browns to win that game, but going up against that front, that's the game where you could argue that up until his performance in Baltimore, that was Deshaun Watson's best game, what he did in that second half against Washington in 2022. So I would think 5, 6 weeks for me would be okay. This is this is kind of who Deshaun Watson is going forward. That would kind of be at the baseline my barometer for him.
All right. Interesting thing with the Cowboys now. Defense has a new defensive coordinator. It's Mike Zimmer. It's the same Mike Zimmer that Kevin Stefanski coached under while he was in Minnesota. Stefanski talked about going against this Cowboys defense under Mike Zimmer.
We'll see. Preseason obviously is not a great indication for any team in terms of the scheme. Coach Zim, obviously I know really well, is an outstanding football coach. So we know that we'll have our work cut out for us. And personnel-wise, I mean, they have a bunch of really, really good players from the D-line back through the secondary. So we'll spend some more time on them this afternoon with our players, and then we'll really dive into them as we get started with our work week on Wednesday. You do have all that time, but you also have new coordinators at times. You have new players at times, so there is a bit of a guessing game on both sides. There's certain seasons where you're going in and there's a coordinator that's been there for a bunch of years, but they may have new players at different positions. So there is a week one. There's definitely the unknown really on all sides.
So, Tim, when you look at the Cowboys, I know there's going to be some obvious guys. What concerns you when you look at them in this Browns have to? This is a game you don't want to say they have to win, but boy, they need to get off to a good start. You can't ease into this season.
Not at all, especially with how the schedule kind of lightens up after the trip to Jacksonville in week 2. So when I look at the Cowboys, what stands out, obviously we talked about, is the pass rush, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, this front. If you can kind of hold them to a stalemate, I think the Browns are going to be just fine, because with DeRon Bland being out, Trayvon Diggs is coming off an injury. All of a sudden, if you can at least negate some of what Dallas brings as far as a pressure package is concerned, I think you can consider that successful. And what's interesting with the Cowboys, yeah, Mike Zimmer's defensive coordinator, but he has also not been on a sideline since 2021 when he was the head coach of the Vikings. So he's been away from the game for 2 seasons. How's he going to look? Is the defense he has going to look like nothing's changed, or is it going to be a struggle to adapt to Mike Zimmer's system compared to what they were working with Dan Quinn the past couple of seasons in Dallas? That's what's going to be interesting for me.
You look over at the offensive side, and obviously Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Jake Ferguson, the tight end. But Ezekiel Elliott and Dowdell and Dalvin Cook potentially. If I'm Jim Schwartz has got to get the starting block. The starting blocks will be out for that defensive line. Go get the quarterback. We'll give you the gun, and you can get right out of the blocks.
Yeah, this is not a team where I would think first down has to be a particular point of emphasis, more so third down, because when you have Dak Prescott, who's still one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, certainly he's a threat to make a big play anytime because of his arm and his legs. CeeDee Lamb is always going to be a tough matchup. I know there could be some rust on him because he sat out all of training camp getting his new contract, but you still have to prepare for CeeDee Lamb like you're going to get 100% of him, because he's one of the better receivers in the NFL. So I think if you're the Browns, you basically need to be able to just keep the Cowboys in front of you. You don't necessarily need to shut them down, but contain those big play receivers, especially CeeDee Lamb, and to an extent Brandon Cooks. Don't let them keep making big plays. And if you're the Browns defensive front, you look at a Cowboys offensive front that's going to be starting a rookie left tackle, potentially Tyler Guyton. They could have another rookie potentially if Cooper Beebe starts at center. Either him or Brock Hoffman will be potentially the starting centers for Dallas. So you look at that offensive line for Dallas. If you're the Browns, you got to be thinking this is a huge opportunity to get that defensive line going. Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, all the guys they have on that defensive line, this should be a day where they can really control the line of scrimmage, because I think if you can control the line of scrimmage and speed up Dak Prescott, make him uncomfortable, especially in an environment like Browns Stadium where the Browns kind of turned that into a fortress last season and the Cowboys did not play well on the road last year, you certainly have the opportunity, if you're the Browns, to really reinforce that home field advantage and kind of put Dallas in a situation where they're trailing. And then as a defense, you can kind of pin your ears back because there's not much of a worry about what they're going to be able to do running the football.
Yeah, and the other thing is make them one-dimensional. Do not let them run the football. As long as you don't let Ezekiel Elliott, Dowdell, or anybody hurt, I'm with you. They should be just fine. Tim Bielik, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out, cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break. Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter for cleveland.com. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, dough, Skrilla, chips, bread, and mo. 2, 5, 10, and 20. 30 big ones, games aplenty. Cheddar, butter, lewd, and scratch. Find the letters, make a match, cause there's many words for cash, no doubt, and many ways to play a cash word. Check 'em out. Cash word from Ohio, lottery. It's game time, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions and prizes, don't you know?
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Former NFL tight end Shannon Sharpe talking about who he sees in the AFC Championship game for 2024. This from ESPN's First Take.
Man, when you look at that Cleveland Browns roster, Swagoo, when you look at that roster from top to bottom, offensively and defensively. Now, remember, last year they finished number 1 in defense. This year, if Deshaun Watson, I'm not even saying he needs to be. Now, if he goes back and be what he was his last year starting in Houston, well, it's over. With that defense and those weapons, with that offensive line, no. So as much as it's so hard to pick up against Patrick Mahomes because he is that guy. He's the one guy that you don't pick against because he's proving it time and time again. Even with last year when we thought he was like, this team, there isn't good enough offensively. Too many drops. The offensive line doesn't do a great job. And what do? They take the show on the road. They don't need to be an Arrowhead. And they get to and they win the Super Bowl again. For me, when I look at the Cleveland Browns, if Deshaun Watson is either now or never, he's under immense pressure, that big contract. And as of yet, he has yet to live up to it because of injuries and obviously what happened off the field in Houston. But if they play, and if I just need Deshaun Watson to give me 85, 90% swag and Stephen A. of what he once was, I like the Cleveland Browns.
With that, let's welcome in Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Ashley, if Deshaun Watson gives the Browns good, effective quarterback play, yeah, I can't argue with that. He doesn't have to throw for 5,000 yards. Just make the plays that need to be made.
Yeah, I saw this clip going around earlier today, and quite honestly, I think it's some of the most on-point analysis of this Browns team that we've seen from the national analysts, because I think that is right on the money. I think if the Browns are in a situation where Deshaun Watson is not 100% the same player that he was when he was in Houston, now I think the Browns believe he can be that, but worst case scenario, he's not. I think you look at the team around him, particularly this defense, and all of the other offensive weapons they have, the strong offensive line they have. And that, in theory, for me, is enough to make a little playoff run. Now, if the Browns are actually going to win a Super Bowl, I do think Deshaun Watson has to be better. I think he ultimately would need to be the best version of himself. We all know how important quarterbacks are in the modern day NFL. Obviously, it's why Patrick Mahomes gets paid what he gets paid out in Kansas City. But really, I think for this to be a playoff team, even if Deshaun Watson struggles and even if he struggles early, I think they're in really good shape with all the pieces around him.
So I know you've addressed this, you and Mary Kay Cabot and Dan Lobby have talked about this. Do you think the Browns offense is ready for the regular season?
I think that we're ready to see it in the regular season more than anything, right? I think whether it itself is ready and has all the kinks worked out, I think that's never really quite the case when you have a brand new offensive system, because what do you need to see it? You need to see it in live game reps, and the preseason just doesn't count, right? I mean, I think largely what we've seen the Browns, how they handle the preseason, how they handle training camp, they're not going to game plan. No team does that. So you're not going to get to see all the moving pieces and parts of the system and appreciate it for what it is. And I think, you know, who's to say whether it's 100% ready, but I think.
All right. So we are talking to Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout, see if we can reestablish connections with Ashley. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, dough, Skrilla, chips, bread and mo. 2, 5, 10, and 20. 30 big ones, games aplenty. Cheddar, butter, lewd and scratch. Find the letters, make a match, cause there's many words for cash, no doubt, and many ways to play cash word. Check 'em out. Cash word from Ohio, lottery. It's game time, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions and prizes, don't you know?
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE with Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. So, Ashley, not a lot of time for the starters in preseason, so it is kind of hard to understand. I know you wrote an article about Jerome Ford, kind of taking on more of a featured role. Take us through that.
Yeah, I think Jerome is interesting because he's in a very different position from last year, right? Entering year 3, obviously, now. But last year, he kind of got forced into duty in a way that no one really expected, because Nick Chubb suffered his season-ending injury in week 2 out at Pittsburgh and was done for the year. But this year, Jerome Ford comes into the season. Number one, he stayed healthy for all of training camp, which is something he was not able to do his first 2 years in the NFL. So he's had a nice, long, consistent ramp-up period. But on top of that, with Nick Chubb remaining on the PUP list, they know he's going to be out these first 4 games at least by the NFL rules. He has this knowledge, okay, and they have this knowledge that, hey, we're going to have to use Jerome Ford more in that featured back sort of role. Of course, last year they loved using him as their third down back. But I think it's just a big difference when you have a player coming into year 3 and he knows, okay, this is how it works. They're expecting a lot more out of me right from the jump. So I do think he is one of the more interesting pieces on this offense, knowing how he was thrust into duty last year. And this year, it's just kind of going to be something that he's worked for all summer, knowing what Nick Chubb was coming off of and what he's been dealing with his rehab after having that knee totally reconstructed.
Yeah, the other thing was, last year you kept losing tackles. You lost Jedrick Wills, you lost DeJuan Jones, so that affects a running back as well. I'm curious about this one too. This is you, Mary Kay, and Dan on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Confidence ratings. How you feel about Deshaun Watson, Kevin Stefanski, and the defense?
Yeah, I think I gave all of my confidence ratings. Nothing was lower than a 6. I think I averaged them out after the fact in total for the team. I was at like an 8.75. So Deshaun Watson, I think I gave a 6 to. I want to see him come back from this shoulder surgery. That is the big unknown. We know there aren't really NFL players who have suffered this injury. But I will say, watching him throughout the offseason, throughout the preseason, I've been cautiously optimistic. So I think 6 is the perfect number to kind of represent that. I think I didn't expect to see him throw as much as he did in the spring. And then general arm soreness aside here at the end of training camp, I don't think I really expected him to come out, that very first week training camp open and throw back to back to back days. Like that was something we didn't know that we were going to see right away, just knowing that everything this injury entails. So I think 6 is the perfect number for him. Kevin Stefanski and the coaching staff, I gave about a 9 to at this point. It just seems like this is Kevin Stefanski's team. He knows what he wants. I think I love some of the coaching changes they've made. I know on our podcast, I singled out Jacques Césaire coaching the D-line now and Deuce Staley coaching the running backs. Both of those guys, former players who current players really respect. They know what they're talking about. I think they bring a different energy to those units. The defense, I gave a 9 as well. I stopped short of giving them a 10 if we were rating out of 1 through 10 on all of these, just because I think, number one, you have to repeat your success from last year. And number 2, the big one, you have to do it against some better quarterbacks with that second place schedule, which we know the Browns haven't had to play in forever. So I definitely think it's not dinging them for anything they did or didn't do yet. It's just like, hey, come out and prove it against some of these tougher quarterbacks that are going to be coming to town this year.
Yeah, I understand that. The Kevin Stefanski thing, I think he's done a great job there. We get fans, and I'm sure you hear him too. Man, I don't know what they want from the guy. He took him to the playoffs. He's a 2-time coach of the year, and he and Andrew Berry inherited 1-31. I think perspective is needed. Now, they need to go to that next level where you're a perennial playoff team. That's the challenge in front of Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, I think. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I would wish that people would just stop thinking that Deshaun needs to be like the 2020 version of himself. In my honest opinion, he's never coming back. We all know this. It's all inevitable. I think we're putting that as his measuring stick because of the contract and because he did ball out that year individually, but the team was like, 4-13? They were abysmal, so they had to change it to a pass-first offense. That's why he had that stat line. We're not asking him to pass for this amount of numbers. They're asking him to be the difference in the game, extend plays, be able to scramble, run, keep us in the game where we're winning games and we're successful.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Ashley, that's kind of an important part of. They were 4-12. The reason he threw for 5,000 yards is they had to come from behind. They were throwing the ball because they needed to. Didn't have a great offensive line. Didn't have a really good running attack. So there are reasons for all of that. Bottom line is what you want. You want teams to feel that when Deshaun Watson and the Browns have the ball late in the game, oh, we're in trouble. Kind of the way Browns fans feel when it's Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow. That's all you want. You want the team to feel like, we got the ball. We got a really good quarterback. We're going to score and win the game.
Yeah, and again, I think you think about the basic fundamentals that they need out of Deshaun too, right? Like you don't want him throwing the ball away. You don't want him taking unnecessary sacks. But I think this all goes back to the point, like this is, I think, the best supporting cast that Deshaun Watson has had around him throughout his career. Basically, he's had that ever since he got to Cleveland, I think. So with all of those other things around him working, that's where it kind of goes back to my original idea of this team really just needs him to be serviceable in order to make the playoffs. But again, I think we've kind of laid it out here. That's not the main goal for this team anymore. I think they need to make a substantial playoff run. That is the next step for them. So yeah, I think it's a mixture of both, right? Like, I don't know that you can get him to replicate those 2020 numbers exactly, but I do think you're going to need him to be at the best he's been since he got to Cleveland, now entering his third season here.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you talked about this, and I'm curious. Orange and Brown Talk podcast, why Denzel Ward coming back is such a big deal to the Browns secondary?
Well, I think you've seen a change in Denzel. I mean, for me, over the last 3 seasons of covering this team, this defense, he really seems like he's just stepping into his own. He's stepping into more of a leadership role. Obviously, he was named a captain last week. That's the first time he's ever gotten that honor, which I found hard to believe. He said he was never a captain at Ohio State, even during his standout career there. But I also think it's the way Denzel Ward plays, and I think it helps set the tone. He is like one of the most aggressive cornerbacks you're going to see. You know, everyone always talks about that one hit. His most famous play when he was at Ohio State is a hit. You don't see that often from a corner. Usually it's a pick, but I think it's just the way he helps set the tone on this defense in particular, the style he plays, the aggressiveness he plays with. You know, we've seen that can get him into trouble, I think, sometimes in terms of the number of concussions he's had. He talked about that a lot last week, about studying the different helmet options he has available to him. He's going to be wearing a new helmet this year after suffering his 5th known diagnosed concussion since he's been in the NFL during training camp. So I think it works both ways, right? Obviously, it presents a risk to him somewhat in the way he plays, but it also is just a huge part of who he is as a player, that aggressiveness. And I think it helps drive this defense as a whole.
So when you look at this week 1 Cowboys games, it's important. You know, you never want to say must win or any of that, and all are important. But the way this schedule lays out, if they can find a way to beat the Cowboys, it kind of just sets some really good things in motion. What do you think some keys are when you look at this matchup? You know you got Dak Prescott, you know you got Micah Parsons, you know you got. I mean, there's some star power with the Cowboys.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think number one, it's making sure you have a handle on CeeDee Lamb as best as you can, because obviously that's who Dak Prescott is going to be looking for most of that passing attack. But we do know, you know, CeeDee Lamb just started practicing again after holding out and his contract situation down there in Dallas. So I definitely think that's going to be the biggest key for this defense. And offensively, obviously, you mentioned Micah Parsons there. I think knowing how the Browns have struggled at tackle in terms of getting all of those 3 main guys back up to speed. You know, we've seen DeJuan Jones practice, but Jack Conklin just got back out there. DeJuan Jones has been out there all of training camp. He started practicing during OTAs, so he progressed the fastest. But Jed Wills is still not out there. So, you know, if Jed Wills can't play for week 1, you assume right now the most likely option for them is to have Jack Conklin play left tackle. That's where he played in college. He's an all-pro. He's a veteran. Sliding him over, in theory, should not be that big of a deal. Plus, you have Joel Bitonio on that left side, so that's going to help things a lot. So if it is those two, I still feel pretty good. You know, Micah Parsons does like to move around, but this Browns O-line, it's a good test for them. You know, obviously Andy Dickerson, new position coach there with Bill Callahan gone to coach with his son in Tennessee. But I think the stars are the keys in a game like this. And I think Dallas has a lot to prove too, coming into this game after a tumultuous offseason down there with CeeDee Lamb, especially holding out and getting that rolling for them.
The one thing that when I think about CeeDee Lamb and Cooks and those guys, the Browns are equipped to, you know, if you think Lamb is trying to be physical, I think Martin Emerson can cover him. If you think he's trying to go deep, well, we got Denzel Ward. You got Greg. The Browns have different ways of taking care of wide receiving threats.
They do, and I think that is part of the reason this defensive back unit has been built so well. I mean, another kind of fun key to this game, I wrote a little bit about this a few months ago when I did my big profile on safety Grant Delpit. He and CeeDee Lamb are best friends going back to childhood. They grew up near each other in the Houston area. They played on the same powerhouse youth football team in Texas growing up when they were in their middle school years. So those are two players who have a lot of familiarity with one another, and I think that certainly will add something to this matchup. And specifically the Browns having a DB that maybe knows better than anyone CeeDee Lamb's strengths and weaknesses in Grant Delpit.
Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter, Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Ashley.
Thank you.
Ashley Bastock. Make sure you check her out. Great Browns coverage in the pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.